It got to a place to where videos on my YouTube channel that were on attracting love would get so much more views than anything else. So it was almost like I kind of pigeonholed myself into this niche that I didn't necessarily want to be in, but those got the most views. So the more videos I would make on attract love, the more views they would get, and the more positive like ego reinforcement there would be, the more money would come. But at the same time, I was realizing that I was like, in a way, trying to feed this machine that I no longer was really passionate about in that way. So in an interesting way, I had to get very honest with myself and look at my own values. And why am I doing this? Because I was starting to make decisions based on like what got the best results, which is outcome focused, versus what am I actually passionate about, which is like an end of itself. So part of that transition for me, and that leads to the emotion and all the breakthroughs that you're asking about, is that I became aware of just how much like I had no ability to really process emotions because I was on a hamster wheel. I was on this hamster wheel of making, for the first 3 years on YouTube, 3 or 4 years, I made a video every single day, no matter what.
Crazy.
For 3 or 4 years. And then it was a huge breakthrough when I went from 7 videos a week to 5 videos a week. That was a breakthrough.
Hi, it's Sahara Rose, and welcome back to the Highest Self podcast, a place where we discuss what makes you your soul's highest evolvement. I am so excited to share this week's episode with you because it is with one of my dear friends and someone who was on the podcast 2 years ago, which that episode became one of our top 5 ever downloaded on Highest Self podcast. You may know him from YouTube. His name is Aaron Daughty. And in this conversation, we get real. We get vulnerable. We share our personal stories of what we've been healing and working through and the exact tools that we have been using. So it's interesting because I've noticed a lot of us, we started our spiritual journey with more like law of attraction or yoga and focusing on the positive. And I believe there's a lot of benefit to that, especially when you're just living a kind of muggle life. You need to focus on the good. But then you realize, well, I can't bypass the sadness and the anger and the guilt and the shame. I can't bypass these lower vibrational emotions because they're all part of me. They're not actually lower. It's what makes me a human being. And the more that I can descend, the more that I can ascend. And it's funny because so many of us have been on this journey on our own. And Aaron and I have been in touch. We're always sharing different healing modalities with each other. And both of us have really dove into emotional healing. So in this episode, he shares his backstory of how he moved from law of attraction to really diving into his emotions. He shares different personal stories, such as how he noticed that he was attracting controlling women in his life until he healed his relationship fully with his inner child and stepmom. I also share my experience of attracting relationships where we were living separate lives until I healed my relationship with my father and the way that my parents were together. So we get really vulnerable in sharing the personal realizations that we've had. Like, this conversation is one of the most incredible we've ever had on the podcast. And it's going to relate to you so deeply because we're all holding on to these unprocessed emotions from our childhood. And when we're able to fully feel them, and again, everyone says feel your feelings, but what does that actually look like in practice? We break it down, each of us, step by step on how we do it. We talk about the spiral dynamics. We talk about the lessons that we've learned, pivoting in your career, and so much more. So you're going to love this conversation. If you're just listening to it, we were in person in Austin on a beautiful set. So you're able to actually like watch us and be with us in person. So I also recommend watching it on Spotify video or YouTube to get the full experience. And one of the things that makes this conversation so powerful is that we have both dove into our communication. And communication is key in healing and having the relationships that you want, but also creating a career online where you're able to share your wisdom, share your message, share your story, and allow it to be seen and experienced and received by others. Because the truth is, you have so much wisdom inside of you. You carry so many codes that you're meant to share with the world. But the thing is, your throat chakra might be holding you back. You might have a story that my voice is annoying, or no one wants to hear what I have to say, or someone else is already doing it, or people don't like when I talk because I ramble. You know, we have all of these different stories that we gain from our childhood that prevent us from speaking our truth. And we need more people speaking their truth, especially right now in this shift that we're in. We need more people coming online, sharing their vision and stories on social media and podcasts and stages and in their companies, with their friends, with their family. And that can only happen when you step into your voice. So for the past 7 years of doing this podcast now, so many people have requested to me, can you create a course about speaking? Like, how did you become a good speaker? How did you become confident enough to have these conversations with people or speak on stages to tens of thousands of people at Google and Facebook and share stages with Dr. Joe Dispenza and Elizabeth Gilbert? How are you able to do that? Like, what did you learn? And I really sat with that question. And I spent the past year putting together this course that broke it down step by step in just 10 to 20 minutes a day over 21 days. And this course is available now, called Speak with Soul. So it will take you from feeling like an awkward and unconfident speaker into fully stepping into your voice, which can lead you to recording your own podcast, IG lives, but also just showing up as the fuller and brighter version of you in your life. So this course is really for anyone that wants to open up that throat chakra and allow their message to be heard by others. And because I just launched it, it's available now for a special 50% off launch rate. So if you're interested and curious, are you ready to just dive right in and spend the next 21 days honing in on your voice? Because the truth is, most of us never practice speaking. You know, besides from like those high school classes where they're like, okay, public speaking, memorize this talk, like word by word, which is so stressful, so mechanical, and so old paradigm. We've never practiced speaking since then. So of course you're not going to feel like a confident speaker because you've never dove into it. You've never taken a course on it. You've never actually made it a priority in your life. And that's okay. Our world isn't set up that way. And that's why it's up to us to decide where we're going to prioritize our attention. So this course might be the first and only course that you need to dive into your speaking. And actually, I'll give you a little taste of the 21st day, the last day that you have, because you'll be recording your own podcast intro. Whether you want to record a podcast right now or not, you're going to get to that level. And I'm going to be guiding you the entire way. So if you're ready to dive in, head over to speakwithsoulcourse.com. Again, that's speakwithsoulcourse.com, and you can find that link in the show notes. So without further ado, let's welcome Aaron Daughty to the Highest Self Podcast. Welcome back, Aaron, to the Highest Self Podcast. It's so good to have you here.
It's good to be back here. It's been a while.
I was telling you, you're my top 5 downloaded episodes ever on the Highest Self Podcast. So how does that feel?
That feels, when you told me a little bit ago, that felt really good.
You have more downloads than Sadhguru, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Don Ruiz.
We've concluded though.
You're a motherfucking star.
That's cool. That's awesome. I remember just sharing my story and it was just a lot of fun.
We were like sitting on your floor for like 10 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
We were just on the floor, real minimal setup, way less than what we have right now. Yes. But hey, you know, we got the job done. That just shows that I think it's the authenticity and just in the moment, because we were talking about stuff we were just naturally passionate about and sharing stories. And I think that's what people really connect with. And this episode, I feel, is going to be on a whole other level because it's like 2 or so years later and we've been friends since then and have grown so much in our own journeys, which we're going to be sharing about. But before we get into all that, what makes you your highest self? What makes me my highest self is when I'm being the most vulnerable and courageous version of myself. So those are 2 values that I do my best to really live by. And when I'm doing what I love, it does take vulnerability. I think that's kind of the backbone of my YouTube channel, the backbone of that episode that you're talking about. But being vulnerable, I think, is a way of really opening the heart. And then courage is like the ability to step into the unknown. And for me, like this last week, for example, I ran a live event and it was like kind of this thing that I'm moving into. I'm kind of dropping the YouTuber identity that I've had for so long. That's brought me a lot of comfort and safety. And I've shifted into this new version of myself that is me getting out of my comfort zone. And I want to consistently do that with live events because I enjoy that dynamic. But that ability to move into the unknown, I think, goes into me becoming my highest self, getting out of the known and into the unknown and trusting that divine process. We are on the same wavelength, bro, because like the unknown has been the biggest theme in my life because, you know, I feel like you and I, we
in our previous versions of ourselves, we're planning things and what's happening and like, what does it look like? And just to fully be in that spirit lead me state of like, I don't know, show me through signs, through what feels resonant, through listening to our bodies and our emotions, which we're going to be diving into. And it can take us places that our conscious mind could have never imagined before. And I think that vulnerability with courage, because so often we think it's like, okay, being strong is like, I'm resilient and I'm capable and I have this shell and armor around me. And then like being vulnerable is like, I'm really tender and I'm really soft. And it's like, you can't have one without the other.
Right.
You know, because if you're only in the soft, it becomes, it's like a flower that just like kind of like diffuses out and it no longer holds its shape. But if you're like so hard, you're just the thorn. And I think it's like to have that contrast is what makes both able to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful. And it does take courage to be vulnerable. And it's like, yeah, it's like a two-way street on the other side.
So many of our listeners know you because your riveting law of attraction videos and your Jesus-like looks and your great ability to express with your whiteboard.
Yeah.
But you've shifted and you've grown and you've dove even deeper into yourself, and like all those versions of you are perfect, and you've dove into this like deeper layer of yourself of like really honoring your emotions and like what's underneath it all. So can you share with us like what that journey looked like for you?
Yeah, the journey for me looked like me becoming very honest with myself and just where I was at in my life. And in a way, I could tell that the way that I'd been living from last time I was on your podcast, we talked about the shift that I made from working the 9-to-5 job, selling women's shoes, into being a YouTuber. And since then, this last like 6 years, I've created a large following on YouTube through sharing my message. And I've created this identity, this ego like identity around becoming a YouTuber. And there was for sure a part of myself that could recognize that had become something that had brought me a lot of safety and brought me money, abundance, the ability to travel, a lot of impact, or a lot of like people, like validation. And over the last like year, I've just realized how much something that I used to be so passionate about, which was making videos and like helping people, had created all this pressure. There was all this pressure now, whereas before I would just make videos that I thought people would enjoy, that I was passionate about. It then got to a point to where I had a YouTube coach that was giving me titles on like how to, like which videos I should be making. I had like, if it got to a place to where videos on my YouTube channel that were on attracting love would get so much more views than anything else. So it was almost like I kind of pigeonhole myself into this niche that I didn't necessarily want to be in, but those got the most views. So the more videos I would make on attract love, the more views they would get, and the more positive like ego reinforcement there would be, the more money would come. But at the same time, I was realizing that I was like, in a way, trying to feed this machine that I no longer was really passionate about in that way. So in an interesting way, I had to get very honest with myself and look at my own values and why am I doing this? Because I was starting to make decisions based on like what got the best results, which is outcome focused, versus what am I actually passionate about, which is like an end of itself. So part of that transition for me, and that leads to the emotion and all the breakthroughs that you're asking about, is that I became aware of just how much like I had no ability to really process emotions because I was on a hamster wheel. I was on this hamster wheel of making, for the first 3 years on YouTube, 3 or 4 years, I made a video every single day, no matter what.
Crazy.
For 3 or 4 years. And then it was a huge breakthrough when I went from 7 videos a week to 5 videos a week. That was a breakthrough. Like my friends,
I'm taking weekends, guys.
Yeah, I'm like 2 days off a week. And my friends were like, really? Wow. Like, cause they knew me. And that was just even on vacation, I'd be like in Costa Rica and I'd be drinking plant medicine. I'd be trying to make videos in the morning. And it just was like, that was the identity just on the hamster wheel. And basically what I became aware of though, is just how that had brought me safety. And I had to become like aware of just what's really driving me. What am I really passionate about? And eventually what I made the choice to do is I started looking at my values. I realized that I was in a way valuing validation and approval over valuing the vulnerability and the courage. And I started to then make new decisions about who I was, where I started looking at my own patterns within my shadow in a way, where I could see that some of the things that drove me were simply childhood dynamics that had never really closed the loop. So I was trying to get my needs met through being this YouTube person and doing all of these things and helping people. If I could help a lot of people, I'd be giving value, I'd be worth something, rather than realizing that I had value for just being me, and that it wasn't dependent on that. So a big part of the journey for me has been that. Also, the emotional work has normally come through certain levels of suffering, whether that be breakups, whether that be relationship dynamics, friendships, and different relational aspects. For sure, there's a lot of childhood wounding that gets brought up for me to lean into. And one of the most powerful processes of this for me has been just learning to really sit with the emotion that I'm feeling in the moment, because whatever the emotion that is coming up, if it is felt, it then becomes integrated. And I think a lot of times in the law of attraction community and the whole like think better thought type philosophy, it's like people are really afraid of feeling their emotions, because if you feel your emotions, you're going to attract something negative. If I feel shame or if I feel guilt, if I allow myself to feel that, then I'm going to attract more negative synchronicity in my life. But that ends up becoming a whole bunch of suppressed emotion that stays stored in the body. So one thing that I had to learn is how to really sit with the emotion that I was feeling instead of distracting myself with business, instead of distracting myself with other things, is really sitting with the emotion that I feel in the moment, knowing that it's showing me something about myself, and that as I don't not necessarily let go of the emotion. A lot of times people say, let go of the emotion. And I even have like hundreds of YouTube videos that say that terminology. But a way that I like to like wire it in more so now is it's not about letting it go because it insinuates there's something wrong with it. It's more of integrating it. And the word integrate means to make whole. So the journey for me has been about feeling the emotion that comes up, becoming present with it, literally welcoming it in. And the funny thing is when you welcome in the emotion, it naturally many times will begin to dissipate. It's only when it's met with resistance that it stays locked in. And then it's been a process of even sometimes dialoguing with like the inner child self that feels not seen or heard, and reassuring it and listening to it. A lot of, I believe, me with my YouTube channel, wanting that to grow and having that be like a major thing that drove me for so long, was that there was a part of me that didn't feel seen as a kid. And when I didn't feel seen, it was like in order to get my needs met, there was a desire to be seen in a different way. And a big insight that I had with that was just around dialoguing with the part of myself when I was young that felt not seen, dialoguing with that part of myself, and then just being there with them, not trying to change them, not like giving them some intellectual advice that my adult would say, but literally just meeting that version of me there, and then starting to feel seen with myself. And that was like very powerful for me, to where then I was like, oh, I can let go of this need or this desire for attention or approval or whatever that dynamic is.
I'm like nodding along, like I'm like yes to every single thing that you said, because first of all, on the conversation of feeling like I'm showing up this way on social media, I need to continue to show up that way. That was totally my story too, with like Ayurveda, of if I talk about anything besides Ayurveda, people will unfollow me. That's what they want. And, but then it became so suffocating that I was like, even if everyone unfollows me, I would just rather be myself than this Eat, Feel Fresh brand. And it ended up being the best decision that I ever made. And I see so many, students and stuff feeling the same. So I think it's like refreshing for them to hear someone like you who, like, you did build a career that was true to you, and something can be true to you and that truth can evolve. And as you learn new lessons, it's like the law of attraction got you to where you were. And I think for a lot of us, a law of attraction is our like first rodeo into this world, because we're so previously used to feeling like shit that we're like, let me just focus on feeling good. Like if I can focus on feeling good, I'm going to have more energy and I'm going to move ahead. And you don't even have the capacity to really feel all of your emotions yet, because it's like, you're not out of the muck. So it's like, it's the perfect way to get you out of there. And then once you build that emotional safety within yourself of like, okay, I know what feeling good looks like. Can we go into feeling bad in a safe way? And I'm seeing so many people like going through this shift of like all of us being like, feel your feelings.
Yeah.
Just do it. And it's so cool and beautiful to witness. And also that hamster wheel of content creation and like really asking where that comes from. I've asked myself that as well. And it's like, I think sometimes our wounds and our traumas, our souls chose them because that is where our greatest gifts lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, you could have taken the pathway of, you know, maybe I'm showing up on YouTube because my inner child wants to be seen. So let me quit YouTube forever to heal that. But it's like, let me heal, you know, as far as I can at this time, that wound. So I'm not creating from that space. And I know you've shifted now from 5 videos a week to 1 video a week, right? So it's like, let me like really make this my art and really care. But also you're a great speaker and you love YouTube and you love sharing. And in a way, like maybe your soul chose to grow up with that wound. So it would push you to want to really be seen because that's
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It's also I'm also in complete like recognition that there's a lot of very successful people in the world that do have very intense childhood experiences that propelled them to do what they've done or to have the impact that they've had. So in a way, it's even if they're not aware of what necessarily the awareness is behind all of that, I still think it can be a good thing. And for me, I recognize that even though I'm aware that like part of me also wanted to add value by making videos for sure. But then there was like this pressure to continue to get the same amount of views and to continue to feed the algorithm what it wants and all the people what they want. And that's where the pressure then became this thing that kind of started to feel inauthentic, but it still had a positive side effect of the people it's reached. You know, so it's still in complete recognition that it's still a good thing. And most people that I know that are like friends that kind of do the same thing that we do, they all have some crazy experience or some childhood thing that propelled them to becoming who they are. And that's one of
we were all just misunderstood.
Yeah. And I think that like everything in our reality has zero built-in meaning other than the meaning we give it. And there's somebody that can give something a meaning that then they just get a complete transformation out of it. And they can even look upon their past. And maybe people listening to this can look at the past situations they've been through. And through the story and through the lens of how they experienced it, they can begin to see it from a different point of view. Because many times the most like crazy childhood situation that you may have been through may have led to you becoming more strong, more independent, maybe a leader. Maybe you were in a dysfunctional family and you had to kind of be the leader for your brothers or your sisters. Or maybe you had to learn how to become more independent. And even though there's a negative side effect of that, maybe it's harder to connect to other people now or something. But at the same time, there's still probably some form of benefit that you can see that then helps you almost tap into that energy to where you start to reap the positive benefits from it. Because when I was last on your podcast, I remember sharing like the whole, when I was working that, not 9-to-5 job, but when I went through my spiritual awakening from growing up, 7 to 15 years old, having the ex-stepmom in my life that was like narcissistic, abusive, no freedom at all, my brother and I had. And that for years had me attracting similar people in my life. Even when my dad divorced her when I was 15 years old, I kept attracting women, specifically women in my life that were controlling and narcissistic. It was an ex-girlfriend who was very controlling and jealous for 4 years. Then I broke up with her. And then I immediately got transferred to a better shoe department at Nordstrom's with a manager who was exactly like my ex-stepmom, literally to a T. She would talk down to employees. She got away with it because she was protected by upper management. And it was like, it was unfair, just like the same childhood dynamics I had where it was unfair that my ex-stepmom was able to treat us the way that we did. But the biggest transformation I had was in 2012. I went through my awakening, and I then realized that if I hadn't gone through from 7 to 15 years old, that abuse, like through the ex-stepmom situation, I wouldn't have had, when I was 22 years old, a spiritual awakening. And with that spiritual awakening came the awareness that like it all served that purpose to lead me to that level of awareness. Then I became grateful for it. And that's when then I was able to forgive my ex-stepmom. I could see also from a different perspective how her dad was narcissistic towards her. And she was just playing out the same pattern. And it didn't make it right, but it did help me understand more. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so grateful that all that happened in the sense that I enjoyed it, because I definitely didn't. But it helped me forgive her. And as I was grateful for that past experience because of who I became, literally within 2 weeks of that realization and meditating on that and forgiving her, that manager of that department in women's shoes that I worked got fired for something really ridiculous. Like, she could have been fired for so many other things that she got away with by upper management, but she sent one email to like this lady that was pregnant, and it was like this uncalled for, and she got fired. And then it was like a whole new world for all of us. But it was interesting to me that there was always specifically a woman in my life, because the woman in my life that was from 7 to 15 years old was super controlling and narcissistic, that there was something that felt safe about that within me. And therefore, subconsciously, I would always attract someone to come into my life that I had to fight for my freedom against. So it was like I found safety in that. And one other thing I'll share about that, this is an insight that I've had recently about this whole situation, is when we talk about shadow work and feeling into the emotions and feeling into the body, I had this realization working with like a somatic therapist, where like somebody that's like helping me tap into my body and just feel what comes up. I had this memory where when I was 15 years old and my dad divorced my ex-stepmom, I went with my brother, my dad, and I went to my ex-stepmom, which was our old house, to get the clothes that we had. And it was like a week after they divorced. And my ex-stepmom and her mom, they were very angry, and they were like throwing our clothes in the dirt, like in the front yard. And it was this real dramatic thing. And in that moment, I had this realization that in a weird way, we went from not able to watch TV, not able to have friends, having to earn, go to school activities, normally locked outside of the house doing chores and stuff, having to sneak enough food to get enough to eat. All of that control, we went from that to within a week at my dad's house or at my grandma's house with my dad, able to play video games, able to watch TV, able to get enough food to eat, all of this like cool stuff. Even though we had all that freedom now, as she was throwing those clothes on the ground, I had this realization that there was something about this new life that felt scary. Like before, to watch TV, if my brother and I were to sneak it, one of us would have the remote control with like the finger on previous channel so that we could like watch TV. When somebody came home, one of us would be on the lookout. When someone came home, we would put the previous channel so it was on the channel it was before so we didn't get caught. We would then throw the remote and we'd go outside and like continue working, you know? So that was like the kind of control we had to live within. Now we had all of this freedom, and with that became anxiety. So one thing that I became aware of is back in that moment, there was a decision that I was made that there's something unsafe about the unknown. There's something unsafe about that freedom. So subconsciously from 15 onwards, I attracted women in my life that could have that level of control so that I could replay and fight against somebody that was trying to control me, so that I could then, because that was my pattern. That's what felt safe to me in a weird way. But then in 2012, when I went through my awakening and I forgave my ex-stepmom, that's when the pattern stopped. That's when I stopped attracting narcissists into my life. That's when I started getting into my own power, and I forgave my ex-stepmom. So it's almost like the patterns in our life are reflecting back the unprocessed childhood experiences that we had that we feel safe with. And safe is another word for like familiar. It felt familiar to have someone trying to control me. So feeling into that energy and realizing that in that somatic session I had, part of that meant me going back to that part of myself and kind of comforting that part of myself and being present with it and listening to that and dialoguing with that part of myself that didn't feel safe. And as I did that, I could feel my body like loosen up and feel myself just really sink into the safety of the unknown and understanding like this dynamic. So integrating past emotion a lot of times is just about feeling inside of your body, becoming aware of these subconscious stories that many times we're simply replaying since childhood, so that within we can kind of like learn the lesson in a way, but also become like allow ourselves to feel safe with that energy, but also something greater, more unknown. And that is where transformation has really come for me. So that's kind of like the full circle loop of that whole experience. But a lot of it's the inner child work, and then also just feeling present inside of the body.
That's such a powerful story, especially how when you created that shift within yourself, your boss was literally fired.
Yeah.
So it's like your outer reality literally shifted. And it's so cool when we start to notice when we make these like growths and these shifts, how like certain people are attracted to us or not attracted to us.
Yep.
And it's like the characters in our lives literally transform. So there's something metaphysical growing up.
For sure, yep.
Because it's like, yes, there's the who you choose to talk to and not talk to, but that was a decision unrelated to you that shifted in your life because you changed from within. So
Yep.
there's like this greater karmic lesson that's happening here.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I think about that, to me, it's like a complete reflection of my own life. The fact that manager got fired as soon as I did the forgiveness thing. At the same time, I'm like, is that super egoic to think because there were 13 other people in that department who felt the same way, or, who was also under the rule.
Maybe everyone was feeling it.
Maybe.
Or she played a different role in their lives.
Maybe.
Or maybe no role in their lives, Maybe
I think
some people weren't triggered.
I've thought about all of that before, and I think that's a mixture of it all, but also at the very fundamental base level, reality is simply a reflection of who you're being.
Right.
So in the deepest sense, everyone in that department, including me, and we're all one consciousness. So it's like, as I shift, of course, in my reality, that shifted. And it's, I think, just a beautiful reflection of just how our reality shifts as we shift on the inside. It's like the lessons no longer need to be learned. So it could be boundaries with people. People may attract people that test their boundaries. But as soon as you really establish your sense of inner boundaries, then maybe you stop attracting certain types of people because kind of like in a way pass the test, or you're not entertaining energy that you used to entertain. So it is kind of like a complete reflection of that energy state.
So for people listening, how were you able to pinpoint it down to that moment when you were 15 and she was throwing your clothes out of the car, or out of the house? How were you able to go back to realizing it was that moment?
I do that process where you just kind of bring the awareness in your hands and your feet, and you bring the awareness in your body. And the mind is what's caught up with a lot of the stories. So the body knows more than even the mind knows. And a lot of times the mind just gets caught up with the story. So by tapping into my heart and certain parts of my body, it was just something that would just naturally kind of came up, where I just remembered that moment. I've had other moments as well, even under plant medicine, for example, where I've done something like ayahuasca, for example. And I've had moments where one time I had this very clear image that came to mind that I had no conscious awareness of at all. I was working with worthiness, and I was in a plant medicine ceremony, and there was this one image that came to me of when I was 7 years old, and my parents divorced when I was 5, my mom and my dad. And when I'd come back home from my mom's house, there would always be an action figure on my bed. And my dad, that was his love language, was gifts. So every time we'd come home, there'd be an action figure. And during this ayahuasca ceremony, I had this one memory of when I was 6 or 7 years old, and then I go into my room and there's just no action figure on the bed. And there was a feeling of oh, does my dad still love me? What does this mean? Am I worthy? Is there something wrong? What's going on? And it sounds silly from an adult's perspective, but as a little kid, they're constantly everything, they're internalizing everything. And that memory came to me while I was in ceremony. And then I could kind of play with that memory and see what that emotion was. How did that version of me feel? And as I connect to it, it's it transforms, kind of like me in the present moment. I have this connection, this belief that in the present moment right now, because this is the only moment that really exists, the past experiences we had kind of are still existing. So there's almost an inner child that's locked in a past reality. And when we energetically go and dialogue with that part of ourselves, I think there's a lot of healing that can happen. And at the same time, I don't think it's absolutely necessary that everyone that's listening to this right now has to find the exact moment and the exact place where this happened. I just have been able to connect to my subconscious and see these things and maybe develop a story about it or a permission slip for me to shift. But even just prompts of different questions. One thing I did is a similar process to this was, when was the first time that I really didn't feel safe? And I went back to a memory of when my dad met my ex-stepmom when I was 7 years old, and I broke my left arm playing soccer, and I was going into get a cast at an office. And I remember sitting there and meeting my ex-stepmom with my dad and my brother. And I remember feeling like there's something off with her. There's something wrong. And I started to not feel safe in that moment. And there was something that just felt intuitively off, even for a little 6, 7-year-old kid. And that was just by asking the question, like, when was the first time I really didn't feel safe? And I just have this memory that kind of surfaces up with that prompt. And then I was able to kind of go back. And I'll share one thing that really helped, that was really transformative for me, is one thing I did is I went back into my timeline in a meditation, and I connected to that 7-year-old version of me that didn't feel safe. And I was able to then, like, also when that memory came up, there were other memories that came up to where I also didn't feel safe. There was another memory that came up where when my dad and my ex-stepmom moved into my dad's house, my brother and I, within a week, the TVs got taken out of our room, the Nintendos got taken out of our room. And when that happened, there was a feeling of, this isn't fair. Why is this happening? What is going on? It was like a shock. You know, we had all this freedom and all of a sudden it all gets taken away. And what I did is I energetically went back to that time and I dialogued with my past self. And I told...
And when you say dialogue, like, yeah, how are you doing this?
I was asking that version of me, like, what are you feeling? How do you feel? Mm-hmm. And then I would be like, I'm here with you. And one thing that I did is I would listen to that part of myself who would express how they were feeling, how maybe uncertain, how much fear's like coming up, or why is this happening? Why is dad allowing this to happen? Like questions like that. And I'd be present with that version of me. But one thing that I said to that part of myself in this like inner child meditation was, I told that part of myself that was like 7 years old, I said, you know what, I just want you to know that these next 7 years are going to be very difficult for you. It's going to be very hard. There's going to be a lot of freedom that's taken away. There's going to be a lot of pain and a lot of experiences you won't really understand why they're happening. But I just want you to know that I'm going to be here with you energetically, and there is an end date. There is a time when you won't be in this situation anymore, and freedom will come and you will be happy, and it's all happening for a reason you just don't understand yet. And by expressing that there is going to be like an end date to that, there was something in me that really relaxed and chilled out. And I don't know what it was, but something from that point going forward, I just felt way more relaxed in my nervous system. I feel like I literally kind of went back to that 7-year-old version of me that didn't feel safe, comforted that part of myself, and also said, hey, what you're going through is serving a purpose. It doesn't all make sense. Life always life won't feel fair for the next 7 years, but things will open up after that. You will have a relationship with your real mom again, because from 7 to 15, my brother and I were kind of brainwashed to not talk to our real mom because we'd get in trouble if we did. So you will talk to your real mom again. Like there was like a dialogue in that way that then felt very soothing to my nervous system. And it felt like in a way I was like healing that part of myself in a very powerful way. So simply prompting with certain questions, there's always a thread. So if you feel unsafe in your life right now, you can ask yourself, when is there another time that I felt unsafe? Where's the core of this? And you can start to tap into that part of yourself and realize that a lot of the patterns in life right now are replayed energy of stuff that happened earlier on in life. And you don't have to know exactly where it came from, but that allows you to kind of understand more of why it's there, and then to close the loop and to kind of heal from it by feeling into it and allowing yourself to feel those emotions. I was allowing myself in that meditation to feel scared, or to feel uncertain, or to feel it's unfair, or to feel angry. I realized I had a lot of suppressed anger from stuff that happened, because if I would defend myself, I'd get in trouble. I wasn't allowed to stand up to someone that was like very controlling like that, you know? So by allowing myself to like literally like clench my fists or like feel anger, it would like allow that energy to flow through me so that it's not being held inside of my body.
So funny, because on such parallel timelines with you of like these exact same prompts and works and inquiries, especially, you know, having just gone through my divorce. And, you know, one of the things that I realized for myself that I had normalized, and I'm curious if there's one instant, I want to actually go back and do this prompt to see if there's one, but like ongoingly, my parents had very separate lives. So I normalized in a relationship, the mom has a life, the dad has a life. They have separate lives, separate friends. And it's normal for the dad to come home and go into his office and shut the door. Yeah. So throughout my life, I've attracted relationships with people I've had very different lives with. Like people who are like, you would see us and like, you guys are opposites, you know, and like kind of curious, but it's like, people are like, I don't know, maybe it's working for them. And so normalized, like for both of us, like our work would come first. And we didn't have many shared friends, shared routines, shared things that we would do on the weekend, but I had normalized it because it's what I had seen. Yeah. Now on the other side of this divorce being like, that's not what I want moving forward. Like I want someone that I have shared community with, partnership with, friends with, like not being an island, the two of us by ourselves, but like being part of an integrated tribe. And like, had I not gone through like the depths of the anger and the sadness and the grief and all the things that it came with, I wouldn't have tied the two of them together. And I shared with you briefly, and we'll talk about on this podcast, I did this like somatic emotional release thing related to spiral dynamics.
Okay, yeah.
So you love
Can't
spiral
wait to hear
dynamics.
about this.
I love spiral dynamics. Wait, can you just share with people, because you're probably better at explaining it, what are the spiral dynamics?
Oh man, it's been a minute since I've studied it, but spiral dynamics is a way for understanding a value system of like how people are interrelated and connected based on values. So the spiral is, there's different colors that represent different, in a way, levels of consciousness or value systems. And when you study it, it makes once you understand spiral dynamics and you look out into the world, you never really see things again the same way. Like within my friend group, we'll say like, oh, that's a very green party. That's a very green party. A green party is like a hippie party.
Yeah.
You know, like there's like certain elements to that, you know? Or there's like, like going to a sports a game is very blue. Normally it's very blue. It's like Budweiser, but it could be a whole spiel of what these different colors mean. But basically, once you understand why you're wired the way you are and what you value and what other people value, it then helps you accept family members in a different way, helps you understand why some family members may not understand you in a certain way because they just simply have different values. And you realize they also have different needs. People that are in maybe a blue level of consciousness, which is much more about, it's much about like religion and the tribe of like not the tribe, that's more purple, but like, what is everyone else doing? They find safety in conformity, safety in like what the government is maybe telling them to do. There's like it's a certain, like level, but then you can also see why people in that level want to, remain a certain way. So
it's fascinating. And, I think maybe I learned it from you. And then I went down a rabbit hole and ended up meeting this guy in Bali who my friend was like, he's just a great healer who helped me through my breakup. And I didn't know anything about him. I thought he was like a body worker, to be honest. So
really?
He like came and I was like, oh, do you need like a massage bed or something? She said it was like a somatic release thing and it was not that at all. So basically he explains like the spiral dynamics and the color, but like starting with beige, which is like
baby.
So yeah, exactly. So the spiral dynamics is also related to your ages and the emotions that you weren't able to fully express. So the beige age is like, as a baby, were you held enough?
Yeah.
And if you weren't held enough, you have this deep inner need to just be held. And then, and it oscillates between an individual and collective need. And it keeps going up like that. So like an individual and a collective need might be like being heard. And then it keeps going back and forth. And I can link something of the spiral dynamics below this episode for people to look into. So he kind of walked me through them and he's like, which one is most resonant for you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm pretty good at all of them. Like, I feel like I'm turquoise, which is like the highest one. And he's like so turquoise is the one that it's like when you've like fully integrated all of the emotions, you're in the state of like unity, not like total unity consciousness, but like, I feel like I do spend a lot of time in turquoise, but he's like, the only way to really like be in turquoise is to have fully assimilated like all of the colors underneath. So all of the emotions underneath. And for me, the one that was the most pressing was anger. Because my dad was very angry growing up. Yep. So there wasn't space for another person to be angry because when one person's, I can't be angry, he's the angry one, Yeah. So I looked down on anger of like, angry people are like irrational. They disturb everyone in the house. They're narcissistic. Like I hated anger. I hated angry people. And one thing I never dated an angry person. I would stay very far away from them because I had suppressed the anger within me. So this guy, his name is James. He was amazing. He sits on the floor and I'm sitting on the bed. He's like, tell me everything you want to say to men. I'm like, I don't know. Some men are good. Some men are bad. Like, I don't hate all men. Like, he's like, tell me everything you want to tell your ex. I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
So I start and he was like, no, really feel that. And he's like, tell me everything you wish you could say to your dad, and like really tune into that energy of anger.
Wow.
And then, so I'm like, and he's on the floor, just like taking it and kind of, and a lot of the things that he said would like trigger him of things that like maybe ways he didn't show up in his own life, because it's like,
Wow.
we're all reflecting back to each other. Then he's like, okay, we're going to go into this energy somatically. So we had to maintain eye contact the whole time. My hands are up pressed against his shoulders. His hands are up pressed against my shoulders. We're standing up like jujitsu style, like this. And he's like, now say all the things you want to say to them, looking me in the eye while pushing me down to the ground, like push me against the wall.
Wow.
And I'm like, at first little, and then he's pushing me back to the point that I'm like falling against the wall. Like he's not holding back.
Yeah.
So it's like, it brings out that warrior in you that's like, shit, like I need to rise up and defend myself. And I would notice I would want to look down and saying, he's like, look at me in my eyes and saying it. And he's like, say it from your core. And I'm like pushing and saying all these things. And he's pushing me back. And it's like a full-blown wrestling match.
Wow.
And it was so cathartic because I would notice my pattern of when it would get tense, I would give up. And I'm like, that's my pattern in life, that I would rather just be like, fuck it. I don't even need them. I don't even need to say the thing. I'd rather move on. Like, I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
But that's me also giving up my power. Me thinking, I don't even want to be an angry person. I'm above that.
Right.
But it's me not fully standing in my boundaries and my worth and like connecting to that and like, no, I will be heard. So I'm literally in this like wrestling thing with him. I'm like sweating, like my heart is palpitating. And it was incredible how much strength that I had that I was unaware of.
Wow.
Because it's like when you're punching even a pillow or something, it's like you kind of just push yourself as much as you want to push yourself. But when there's a human being, like me, I'm a small girl, big man pushing you back, it's like, you know how they say like moms like lift up a car that their like babies are under, and they can like lift up a like 1,500 pound car, like all of a sudden they get the strength. It was like that coming through. And it was like this ancestral, like all of the woman in my lineage who like couldn't say no, who couldn't say enough, who couldn't leave. And like channeling that anger through my body of just being like, no, like this is enough. Like this ends with me.
Yeah.
And it was also really interesting because for me, there was the energy of disgust. Which anger also sub of it is disgust. And he's like, every time you feel that disgust, spit in this like bucket, kind of like how they do in combo and medicine and things. So and he's like, what most people do is like, you feel energy of disgust, you swallow it. So then you're recycling it back into your system. So I'm like spitting into this thing. And when he left, I literally like dry vomited because it was like, I was like purging this energy of like disgust and just like rage that I was holding on to, that I dry vomited. And I realized how cathartic that was. Yeah. So after that, I was like, I feel like I need to sit with combo because I need to purge. Like there's still this energy of like, I don't want to feel disgust when I think about, all of these things. So I was like, I'm going to sit with combo. I'm like asking people, I'm looking people up. And then all of a sudden I manifest like Bali belly. So I vomited like the whole day, like 4 times in one day. I'm just—
Wait, what's Bali belly?
Bali belly is like when you get like the food poisoning of Bali.
Okay, got
Bali
it.
belly.
Yeah.
Which for most people it's diarrhea. I actually got the vomit only kind. So I was just like vomiting. And I was like, thank you, God. Like this is the exact ceremony that I needed. And like purging that energy of disgust, which is like cleared from my system now.
Yep.
And now I'm like, if I had not gone into the depths of anger, the depths of disgust, the depths of rage, the depths of not being met, and like fully experience them at their core, which again, there are deeper levels. Like it's not a one-time done process. I wouldn't be able to show up with so much like lightness and love and juiciness. And it's like exactly my fear. If you told me this 4 years ago, I'd be like, no, I don't want to manifest anger. I don't want to manifest that. Like, and it's like the polar opposite is true. So it's like, this is why that emotional fluidity is so important, because then it's like, you can go into that disgust, you can go into the anger. And then on the other side, you're in orgasmic joy and bliss and unity. And it's like, you don't have to stay anywhere. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah. That's powerful. So you did end up doing combo?
No, I manifested the natural kind. I just vomited all day.
You didn't have to do actual combo. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I remember one time when I used to, so back in 2012 when I went through my awakening, before that I was smoking weed, like cannabis, like all the time, like all day, every day for like a year or two. And I remember that I felt, there was this moment that I had where I realized that like the reason I was doing it was to numb the emotions from my childhood. Like it was a way for me to like at the end of the job, working the 9-to-5 job I didn't like. It was a way for me to go home, smoke, completely like, zone out of that energy. And I remember the moment that I quit and I made the choice, because for 2 or 3 weeks I went back and forth, and it was like something I was very afraid of not doing anymore. And then eventually I had friends that owned a smoke shop that I went to, and I bought like this $300 bong. And I was like not getting the message, even though my soul was kind of like, you should stop. And I bought this bong, I went home and I loaded up a bowl, and I took this one hit. And as soon as I breathed it in, I knew like I shouldn't have taken it. And I knew that I shouldn't have like bought the bong. And as I was breathing out, I started like having this crazy release where I started crying. I could feel all of this stuff come up from my past, where like I was with an ex-girlfriend before that hated the fact that I smoked, and I would have to like hide it almost. Like she would drink and I didn't drink, but I smoked, and it was this weird thing. I felt like all of her energy that she felt when I was always kind of like emotionally not present because I was smoking. Also, I would like hide it when I went to my dad's house to see my sisters. I would smoke and be super high, and I could like feel the disappointment or like the energy that I felt, that self-judgment that I had about that. But basically, I went through this process of like releasing, and honestly, like also kind of like breaking up with the spirit of ganja in a way, or cannabis. And it was a very emotional experience. But after that, for like 2 or 3 weeks, I would throw up out of nowhere. I like stopped cold turkey. I would throw up this yellow stuff. And I intuitively knew that it was the year or two of me smoking all the time, of all this stored energy that was inside of my body. So as I was doing it, I was like grateful. I'm like, thank you. And I'm like throwing up this yellow bile. But I just knew it was connected to my lungs, connected to the smoking and the numbing of the emotion that I experienced for 2 or 3 years of smoking nonstop, So yeah, I wanted to share that too, because it's like, I think that happens. Like we have stored energy inside of our body that comes from past experience, and it kind of stays there until we release it or go through. Sometimes I think like a detox or a cleanse can be very powerful. Combo can be powerful. I guess the belly can be powerful, But yeah, it's like it's all a reflection of like, also I think breaking up energetically with past patterns, like you going through your divorce and then having that purge of that anger and all that energy that was probably kind of under the surface somehow was very freeing for you. And there's a saying that I've heard before that I really agree with. And that's like, if you don't allow yourself to feel the bottom level of emotions, you're capping the amount of positive emotions you can feel. So if you want to go higher and you want to feel higher vibrational emotions, you must actually become okay with even the lower vibrational emotions, because then you kind of grow roots to where then there's like a channel that allows you to go even higher. So it's the exact opposite of what most people think. They're like, I'm not going to feel shame or anger or guilt. Instead, I'm going to feel love, joy, peace, and enlightenment or whatever. But focusing on that, it's like there's no roots. It's about clearing and feeling into that energy and having a healthy relationship with emotions, because emotions are just indicators, indicating what's inside of us, what's subconscious we can bring into the conscious, we can feel. And the more you feel, the more you heal.
Absolutely. And I used to try. I'm like, I'm only going to live in joy all the time. And it doesn't work, because if one emotion is all you feel, that becomes neutral and it no longer is joy. It's like you
need the contrast.
Exactly. So my question for you is, you talk about feeling your feelings. I feel like a lot of people, they don't really know how. Like, do you use sounds and like emote and sound it out? Are you like tapping on meridians? Like, what are you doing when you're like, okay, I'm going to go into this process of like feeling my pain, feeling my suffering? Like if it's just you alone at home, how do you do it?
So there's 2 things I'll say. One is, if it's just a simple process where you're tapping into your body, the key that I've learned is to not judge myself for what I am feeling or not feeling. There's times in the past where I do this kind of work and I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling it super strong and powerful. Does that mean I'm like, there's something wrong with me? But it's realizing that the more you put the awareness inside of your body, the more the energy goes there, and the more you then start to become aware of what's there. So this isn't a practice I recommend someone doing once or twice. It's an ongoing thing where for 10, 15 minutes a day, you breathe, and you breathe in and out through your nose. And then what you do is you put the awareness inside of your body and try to keep the breath continuous. So it's like, but not without like long breaks or breath holds necessarily, but it's like breathing to allow the energy to flow through and putting the awareness into the heart.
Breathing in through your nostrils or your mouth?
I do it through my nose personally. But the main practice is just putting the awareness inside of the body and then being aware of what am I feeling? What are the sensations in my body right now? What am I feeling? And then from there, it's the outside in the sense that what are the sensations in my body? What am I feeling? What is the feeling that's tied to the sensation? And then if you'd like, you can ask yourself, is there like a memory or some type of story, some type of mental mind thing that might be connected to it? And it'll help you kind of start to unravel this information. So simply putting the awareness inside of the body over time, just for 5 or 10 minutes a day, you start to become aware and you get better and better at having the awareness on the inner energetic field. I know Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about this, but it's like the inner body, just putting the awareness on the inner body brings awareness into the present moment. And the second thing I'll say is I'm a huge fan of just like breath work. So somatic release breath work is a practice that I really enjoy, and it's breathing in a specific pattern. The ceremonies are generally like an hour long, and it's breathing in a certain pattern where you have these big releases where you are able to express emotion that's been repressed. And for me, I've had some of my biggest breakthroughs have come through that kind of breath work, like breath work that involves breathing a lot of oxygen in that way. And I've had huge breakthroughs where then on the breakthrough that I have energetically then completely changes my life in very quick ways sometimes, but it's all for a bigger growth process. So
yeah, so we geek out over new spiritual systems. There's another one called the spiral, which is also based on spiral dynamics, and it's kind of related.
Is it breath work?
No.
Okay.
So you go to like whatever it is that you're feeling. So let's say, I don't know, I'm feeling lonely or whatever it is. And you muscle test. So you like the typical muscle testing that you do, like the little okay sign in with your thumb. So you go, there's like this chart and it's based on like the Chinese elements. So you go, is it related to fire, earth, water, air?
Yeah.
And like whichever one breaks, it's related to that one. And then there's organs underneath it all. Like, so is it related to small intestine, like liver, kidney? Like, so whichever one breaks, it's related to that one. Then it has a list of the emotions underneath that. So then you ask yourself, is it, or even then you might just know which one it's related to. Okay, it's related to the energy of loneliness. So then you feel the loneliness somatically in your body, exactly what you just said. Where do you feel it? Oftentimes a memory comes up.
Yep.
Then you let yourself fully have that experience. So for me, like one of them was loneliness now that I'm single. And I'm like, the memory that came up was this memory of being 12 years old and everyone had a boyfriend except for me. And it was like this feeling of like, I'm forgotten. I'm never going to have a boyfriend. Like the boy that I liked didn't like me back. And it was like the end of the world. And it was like, I'm not chosen. Like, and it was like that little girl that was like still living in me. So then I like fully like felt her, and like, she just wanted to cry and she was so upset. And so you let yourself have the feeling and then you muscle test again. And you're like, has this emotion fully cleared? And if not, you're going to be weak. And if yes, you're strong and you can kind of feel. And it's like so cool because you witness a second ago you were strong, you felt the feeling, and now your muscle test is firm.
Wow,
so you're like, wow, this shit really works.
Yeah.
So it's like another just layer that you could add to it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll send you the book. But yeah, breath work as well. Like I try to do at least just like 10 minutes a day of a breath work practice, but the long journeys, I feel like you can go way deeper in.
Yeah.
Another thing I think you do, you cold plunge, right?
I do.
That is like life-changing.
Yeah, it can be for sure.
I did not start cold plunging until this divorce. And I'm like, holy shit, like getting out of that cold plunge and like, oh my God, like I'm safe. And it's just sensation. It's just a moment of time. Like I've had so many downloads from that.
Yeah. And if you even think about the process of getting into very cold water, the key is becoming like present to uncomfortable sensation. You talk about feeling emotion that's not comfortable to feel. The more you pattern yourself to do that, you then let the energy dissipate. You becomes more integrated, become more whole. And in a way, getting into a cold plunge is a very similar way of sitting and becoming present to the energy of the cold. Whereas normally when you first get in, you're like, holy shit, this is cold, you're tense. But if you can get in and then allow yourself to really focus on your breath and just relax, in a way, you don't resist the cold. You can embrace the cold. And as you embrace it, it becomes like it becomes a lot easier. And then that symbol helps you in your life when it comes to uncomfortable sensations in your body, when it comes to someone else crossing a boundary. Like you're able to actually like sit and be in your body to then make the next conscious choice, whatever that is, whether it's setting a boundary, whether it's deciding I'm going to feel this and let it be there, because that's all it wants to do. Like the loneliness or those negative emotions that come up, they just want to be felt so that then the energy can flow through. And it's like, that's the pattern that we can have, is welcoming the sensation and then letting it dissipate versus trying to avoid it and not feel the loneliness. So then going out and doing, like trying to rid itself of the emotion. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Because that's what life is. It's like contractions, right? It's like
Yeah.
contract and then you expand, contract, expand. But if you're just like, again, always expanding, you just expand into the abyss, always contracting, you just, you live like most people do actually.
Yeah.
So I feel like with the cold and hot therapy, you literally somatically get to experience that and then witnessing yourself and then knowing like, me being in the cold is just a moment of time. How much can I soften into this? And then when you're in those shitty moments in life, it's like, how much can I relax into this? And
Right.
trust that I'm okay. And then going into the heat and like letting yourself be fully held by the energy of the heat. I know you're a big sun worshiper
Yep.
as well. And
Yeah.
like letting that energy just like hug you and engulf you and like know that you're always supported and held by the elements. And it's just such a beautiful practice for me because I was like, I will never cold plunge. I don't want to be cold. Why would I want to put myself into pain?
Right.
But it's like pain is going to happen regardless.
Yeah.
So it's like you can either choose it and become adept at it and make it yo daddy, or
I like that.
can run away from it and
Right.
then it's going to spank you in the ass. So you get to choose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes. So share with us more about your events that you have coming up and everything that you're up to now.
Yeah, the new part of myself is there's a lot of things I would normally be doing as of like last year. I'd be doing a lot of online virtual things. I'd be doing YouTube videos. And I've kind of taken a step back to where I'm just going to focus on what I'm really passionate about and what really lights up like my heart, what really lights up my passion and what I'm excited to grow into, something new. So for me this year, the first month of the year, I did a live event here in Austin, and it was something that I felt like I just intuitively had to do to wire in this new energy. So I did that last week. It was a lot of fun, and go on throughout the rest of the year. I have retreats planned and live events that I'm going to be pocketing in there just to get into this energy as much as possible. And then instead of making separate YouTube videos, the goal is just to get all this footage of live events and then to clip that into videos. So my intention is to wire in this new me and not default back to the old part of myself that found so much comfort in just making YouTube videos and staying at home and doing marketing and stuff. So yeah, so now I'm events, retreats, still going to be making videos here and there, but mainly it's like, I want to focus on this new part of myself, which has to do with the live event component.
I love that you're fully going for that. And I so relate to not going back to that old identity.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy when you have these big life shifts to like cling on to any former version of you for comfort and safety because you know it,
Right.
and it's to be like, no, I didn't experience this huge, phoenix rising from the ashes for no reason. It's so I can rise. So I love how you're, doing live events is harder.
Yeah.
It's harder. It's more work. It's more planning. Often there's less people who see it,
Yep.
but it's like, that you love it. And I'm the same way. There's nothing like being with people in person. And
It's
I feel like,
different, yeah.
In this day and age too, you can make a YouTube video and like edit it and like make it interesting, but like not actually be able to carry that frequency in real life.
Right.
So I feel like those of us who are embodied and are doing this, we also have a responsibility to like connect with people in person and give them those experiences. So y'all, I highly vouch for his events. He's
Thank
the real
you.
deal in person. He exists.
Thank you.
Sometimes you're like, is that an AI? You never know online. So thank you
funny.
for putting this work out into the world. We will share your links and everything. So we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me back on. And it's always so much fun and a
Yes.
pleasure to be with you.
I am feeling so juiced up, yet so grounded, yet so inspired after that conversation with Aaron. Yes to the emotional healing. Yes to the shadow work. Yes to the diving deep into your childhood wounds so you can take those as soil and grow into the beautiful flower that you're here to be. So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're inspired by Aaron, by myself, by many thought leaders out there sharing their voice on social media, YouTube, podcasts, stages, coaching, then that means it's within you too. So I invite you to join me for my Speak with Soul course. This is my 21-day guided journey, super affordable, to take you from feeling like a little bit of an awkward speaker to being confident AF and sharing your voice, whether it's on Instagram Lives, podcasts, or even just in your friendships, relationships, at your work, because your voice is your calling card and it's what's going to create the life that you truly desire. And again, most of us have never spent time on it. And today is your invitation. So we have a special launch price going on right now. So head over to speakwithsoulcourse.com. Again, that's speakwithsoulcourse.com. You can find that link in the show notes to get started right away. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I'm so deeply grateful to have you here on this journey. And I'll see you on the next one. Namaste.